that came out of Kemet, what the Greeks call Egypt. If you go back and look at some of the ancient documents, if you look at the book of Coming Forth by Day and by Night, you'll see all the principles that the Europeans and other people called Hebrews adopted for their Bible. Jesus Christ is not the first crucified and risen Savior. He's the 33rd. Atharu, an Egyptian and Kemet king, is the world's first crucified and risen Savior. Before Jesus Christ came on the scene, crucified and risen Saviors was found in Africa. They were found in Europe. They were found in Asia. They was found in Mexico. This is an old story. There's nothing new in Christianity. I think you need to look back at the African religions that the Europeans have taken this from. There's another saying that goes, says everything that the Europeans have told you about himself is a lie. Everything he has told you about us is a lie. Everything he says he has discovered or invented, he has stole from someone else. And that's also true from religion. Religion is an African concept. Anytime you talk about resurrection, heaven, life after death, that's an African concept. And I'll point out one other thing. Before the Europeans came into Africa, the Europeans burnt their dead. They didn't bury their dead. If someone is burying their dead, they already have the concept of the body raising up from the grave and living again. Before the Europeans came into Africa, only Africans buried their dead. The Greeks and the Romans learned that from us.
Okay. Santi, let's take another call. Caller?
Yeah, I just have a question. I just wanted to know, you're talking about you pretty much want to hold everybody accountable who had anything to do with the slavery.
Absolutely.
What about your own ancestors who basically sold the black people to the European people?
Okay.
How do you plan on handling that?
Okay. Santi. Well, if you'd have been listening a little bit earlier, we pretty much already dealt with that. You see, when these Europeans decided to declare war and invade Africa, no African kings were there to sell anybody, okay? We wasn't there. Now, what you get is later on, after this invasion had taken place and so much captivity and enslavement were taking place, you had some African groups forced due to survival. You either capture some people or you're going to have to take their place. So it was more of a survival thing. But we have documents that goes back to when the Europeans first came to Akebu land, to Africa, and they document the way the people were, how the people lived, and talked about how beautiful the people were, and then turned right around and go on to recommend that these hospitable and wonderful people be made slaves to work and sow and do all that is necessary and adopt their way. So I mean, we can't get caught up into this Africans sow other Africans. The day Queen Elizabeth, Prince Henry the Navigator, Pope Pius II, Bartholomew de las Casas, the day they decided to declare war on Africa, we were not there to sell anybody. So you can't use that, okay? And that's pretty much the answer to that.
I'd like to comment on that. And I have in my hands a little book here. This little book is The History of the Negro that Brother Oscar Exum from Memphis, Tennessee, co-chair of the Memphis chapter of NCOBRA, was very happy to loan me. And I got it a little bonded because it's 100 years old. I don't want to destroy it. But in this little book, there's a quote from what they call a missionary, a European female missionary who was really a European female invader. And she writes in the 1500s of her first encounter with the Africans. And this is what she had to say. Their manner was such that it was impossible to take offense. Their code of morals was perfect. The naturals are the only virtuous people that are to be found anywhere on earth. Those were our people before the Europeans got there. We knew nothing of crime. We knew nothing of stealing. We knew nothing of all the offenses that the Europeans came in. Homer, Greek writer, wrote about Africa. He said when Jupiter, father of the Greek gods, takes a holiday, he goes to the banquets of the blacks, a people humble, courteous, and devout. We were religious people. Now what about Europe in the 1400s? What kind of condition was Europe in? Well, Europe was diseased. The plagues had just ran through Europe in 1340 and 1350. 1/3 of the population had died, the rest of them was sick. Europe was broke. They were hungry. Kings and queens couldn't read and write. They were illiterate, and they were poor. They came out of Europe. They were looking for food. They were looking for wealth. They were looking for gold, precious minerals, diamonds, all the things that Africa had to offer. Europe had nothing that we wanted. That trade was strictly a one-way trade.
Absolutely, and then we must be careful, because you notice when Europeans refer to that period, they like to refer to it as the Dark Ages or the Black Plague. But we have to change that terminology. It wasn't the Black Plague, it was the White Plague. But Barbara, we have another picture that we like to show, and this is what happened to many of the resistors, people that resisted enslavement. And here we have a picture of a man being hung with a hook by the ribs alive, and were allowed to suffer hours upon hours upon hours, a hook through the ribs, and just leave you hanging there in agony. You see, and these are the kind of things that our people saw year after year, day after day, hour upon hour, and this is what transformed the African man and woman into the Negro slave. And we must understand, you see, when we want to talk about forgive, before you can forgive, you have to first know your story. Now, this is horrible, to hang a man by a hook through 2 ribs until he just suffer and die. And this is the kind of thing that went on, and this is the kind of thing that our people had to witness constantly.
Now, I'd like to point out one other thing about this type of torture that came out of Europe. This was developed by the European Christian Church. If you remember the Inquisition came up with all kinds of horrible ways to kill people. They had what they called the triple death. In the triple death, they would hang an individual, man or woman, until he was nearly dead. Then they would cut him down. Then they would split him open and let his bowels fall onto the ground. That was the second death. But he's not quite dead yet. And then the third death, they would tie him between 2 horses, and they would draw and quarter him. This is what Europeans did to each other before they came into contact with Africans. They were already experts in torture, murder, rape, and mayhem. This is the plague that descended on Africa with Prince Henry the Navigator, King James I, the author of the authorized version of the Christian Bible. This is the death and destruction that they brought on African people.
Okay, and brothers and sisters, make no misunderstanding. We are not showing these pictures to try to appeal to some morals of Europeans. We understand that they do not have morality that you can appeal to. We understand this. These images and this program is designed basically to teach African people about their Holocaust, their Maafa, their suffering. Because before we can heal, you must first know your story. We must first understand what are the conditions that went into creating the Negro slave that is still perpetuating itself today, 135 years, so say after the end of slavery. We still see our people psychologically in the same pitiful condition. Okay, we have another picture we want to show. The death marches, marching our people from the inner Congo and the inner parts of Africa to the coast where they can load them on ships. Many of our people died just on the death marches, okay? And we got to understand this went on day after day after day, okay? Here's another shot. We have the death marches where some of our people were too fatigued to make it. They shot them on the spot, okay? And we got to come to grips with this and understand what was going on. Here go another picture of just bodies that they're just dumping. People who resisted, some of the people who just collapsed from the fatigue, and here they are disposing of the bodies, Okay?
Brother Tehuti, I just showed 3 pictures. But let's take a look at what we're looking at in numbers. After Europe declared war, unilaterally declared war on Africa in 1441, 30 to 40 million Africans died in battle in resisting the invasion. 30 to 40 million Africans died, this is a second 30 to 40 million, not the same one, died from famine and disease brought to African